uno en inglés.
Um, Hello, everyone. On behalf of UNAM, Mexico's National Autonomous University, here in UNAM in Los Angeles, we welcome you all. It is an honor to have you here, and we thank you so much for making it all the way to downtown Los Angeles on a Friday evening. I know it is a challenge. It is a challenge. And I want to take the possibility of saying some words of gratitude for the audience that we have in the States and in Mexico City that are following us on Facebook Live to attend this day. A talk, but it's truly a very professional and academic oriented session to discuss empowering pedagogies, race, gender, sexuality, and migration in Chicanx, Latinx literature in the framework of a huge effort that UNAM is doing in Mexico City, and in our branch in San Antonio, as well as here in Los Angeles. It is called an encounter, a huge encounter to talk about literature and Chicana culture, perspectives from the Latinx and Latinx and Chicanx culture in Mexico and the United States in current times. And I'm going to say some words regarding the bio of each one of the very distinguished scholars that we have today with us. They are coming from Mexico City and from Texas and California, okay? And so I welcome you all, and I will give you the floor after their presentation in order us to have the possibility to interact with them, as well as I do so for the persons who are following us in Facebook Live. So I will start mentioning Professor Nati Golubov. Nati Golubov, which is a friend and my colleague because we belong to the same playground. CSAN is a playground, right? The Center for Research on North America, which I'm longing, I miss them so much. Well, Nati is affiliated with this center, the Center for Research on North America, and she teaches in the English department at UNAM in Mexico City. Her recent work explores the geographies of contemporary US narrative fiction, including the genre of popular romance. She recently edited the collection Los placeres de la lectura, cuerpos, afectos y textos. So please welcome the floor.
Well, thank you all for being here. I want to begin by thanking UNAM LA for hosting the panel. Directors for bringing us together, and her wonderful staff for being so welcoming and for making the entire trajectory here so efficient. And of course, Dang and Anita for also being here. And I'm sure we'll have a really nice conversation. Anyway, the title of my more of an essay, I suppose, is called Teaching Autohistoria Teoría. And I'm going to read. Published more than, podemos ponerla. Published more than 40 years ago, this bridge called my back, edited by Sherry Moraga and Gloria Anzaldúa, and Borderlands La Frontera by Anzaldúa continue to resonate today, their transformative power undiminished. Few books shape our lives, reshape our lives. Even fewer impact academic discipline and disrupt feminist conversations. I speak today as a professor in the field of literary studies, and I will attempt to understand why these two books endure and continue to move us, despite our distance from the historical moment in which they were written. One clue to answer this question is suggested by Bell Hooks in her book, Feminism is for Everybody, in which she states the following, and I quote, "Everything we do in life is rooted in theory. Whether we consciously explore the reasons we have a particular perspective or take a particular action, there is also an underlying system shaping thought and practice." End of quote. What I would like to hang on to is the idea that theorizing is practiced by us all in the conduct of our everyday lives when we abstract general ideas from particular experience, which we can then use to live better together. This bridge and Borderlands generated new vocabularies to name and therefore make visible the lived experiences of women of color in the US. The coalitional goal of the anthology was to bring together, to bridge the gaps between various women's groups, academic theories, and non-academic modes of knowledge and epistemologies. And I quote, "A theory in the flesh, which means one where the physical realities of our lives, our skin color, the land or concrete we grew up on, our sexual longings, all fuse to create a politic born out of necessity. Here we attempt to bridge the contradictions in our experience." End of quote. For these mujeres de color, theory is not a luxury, but a tool for survival. Essentially, as I help my students develop their own methods to critically understand literary and other types of texts, I also seek to make theorizing habitual, my classroom a space to hacer teoría. This bridge and Borderlands compel us readers to experience the transformative force of writing as we witness the often painful descriptions of the subjective impact of what the Combahee River Collective in the anthology called, and I quote, "the simultaneous oppressions that all women of color face," end of quote. However, we also experience the power of the textual strategies deployed to destabilize a multiplicity of those very structures and meta-narratives designed to sustain these oppressions: generic, disciplinary, the boundaries between self and other, insider and outsider, us and them, between cultural and gendered identities, the private and the public, the singular and the plural, the past and the present. The complexity and diversity of women's experience become tangible in the form of the books themselves. This bridge gathers interviews, letters, poems, essays, fragments, manifestos, photographs, illustrations, engravings, and a ranging web of references that weave a sophisticated palimpsest of 30 spatialized dispersed voices, which coexist in the book itself, its pages transformed into a place of encounter in which, as readers, we too are troubled by the many tensions that the writers themselves work through together. Their struggles arise from the pain of not belonging and of fully belonging, of being seen and experiencing invisibility, of feeling too dark or too light, of being too willful or too obedient. The writing itself is a bridge connecting the reader to the writer across time and space, an invitation to acknowledge the world of intricate connections and divergences between subaltern radical women of color. These bridges ask us to cross symbolic, material, and subjective borders and distances in an effort to both further social justice and acknowledge the value of subaltern knowledge production. As Audre Lorde states in this bridge, and I quote, "Those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are Black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning to stand alone, unpopular and sometimes reviled, and how to make common cause with those others identified as outside the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. In a world of possibility for us all, our personal visions help lay the groundwork for political action. The failure of the academic feminists to recognize difference as a crucial strength is a failure to reach beyond the first patriarchal lesson, divide and conquer. In our world must become, define, and empower." End of quote. Academic feminists tended to treat gender relations as dichotomous and asymmetric, a binary logic from the master's toolbox, which overshadows the differences between women. Define and empower, such is the conceptual work produced by these two books that outline a borderlands methodology destined to chip away at the many structuring binary oppositions that sustain what Sherry Moraga describes as a, and I quote, "calculated system of damage," intended to ensure our separation from other women, but particularly those we learn to see as most different from ourselves, and therefore most fearful. The women whose pain we do not want to see as our own. Call it racism, class oppression, men, or dyke baiting, the system thrives, end of quote. The Chicana border methodology takes as its object of study the experience of dwelling in the borderlands, understood as a specific locality and a material, geopolitical, linguistic, and symbolic space. Here, nothing is clear-cut, so the rigid categories of thought that belong to the master's toolbox are undermined. Although they may not be overcome necessarily, in practice, oppositions can be dissolved by embracing contradiction, ambiguity, hybridity, and pluralism. Borderlands are, as Ansaldúa has famously stated, and I quote, "a vague and undetermined place created by the emotional residue of an unnatural boundary. It is a constant state of transition. The prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. Los atravesados live here. The squint-eyed, the perverse, the queer, the troublesome, the mongrel, the mulatto, the half-breed, the half-dead. In short, those who cross over, pass over, or go through the confines of the normal." End of quote. Obviously, this is not a space of loss, but of proliferation. It may be a place of death, but also the birthplace of multiple ways of knowing and a place from which to decolonize the mind from the ground up through the body. Ansaldúa describes herself as a citizen of the borderlands as follows, and I quote, "I am a wind-swayed bridge, a crossroads inhabited by whirlwinds, Gloria the facilitator, Gloria the mediator, straddling the walls between abysses. Your allegiance is to the third world, say the members of my race. Your allegiance is to your gender, to women, say Black and Asian friends. Then there's my allegiance to the gay movement, to the socialist revolution, to the new age, to magic and the occult. What am I? A third world lesbian feminist with Marxist and mystic leanings. They would chop me up into little fragments and tag each with a label. You say my name is ambivalence, only your labels split me. End of quote. Ansalduas is not a search for an identity, for integrity and sameness, but the cautious exploration of a self empowered by the choice to be multiplicitous, not one, but many. Let us recall with bell hooks that, and I quote, being oppressed means the absence of choices, end of quote. So the decision to resolve internal strife by sliding into a plural personality is a step towards liberation, not dissolution, a self born from within the borderlands themselves. This multiplicitous self is multilingual and exists in language, so it can be rewritten. In the chapter, How to Tame a Wild Tongue, Ansaldua's many affiliations I directly expressed in language. Chicanos speak many languages, she explains. Standard English, working class and slang English, standard Spanish, standard Mexican Spanish, North Mexican Spanish dialect, Chicano Spanish, Tex-Mex, and Pachuco. Each one of these is associated with a particular set of relations, histories, and places. Language is fundamental to cultural identity, and stories are the means by which women of color shape their own lives in tension with other stories. The Chicana Borderlands methodology begins with this rewriting as a repositioning, a reclaiming of the past, of territory, of the right to speak the self. The body is crucial to this reformulation because it is the material register and witness of injustice and violence, the bridge to connect the I to the collective, as well as a site of memory and a dwelling, marked by those internalized habits with which one can materialize and live out the very oppressions we seek to challenge. This is a body politics and a politics of the body that thrives in the borderlands, a multi-layered cultural interface marked by collision and admixture, the uncertainty of in-betweenness, as well as fertile ground for the emergence of the unexpected. Code switching, code mixing, and the unashamed use of loanwords are not evidence of ignorance, but suggest a desire to illuminate fragments of a reality that may not exist in one language, but do in another. Years after she wrote Borderlands La Frontera, Ansaldúa coined the term autohistoria teoría, the origins of which can be found in her earlier writing. This is a theory of a coming into being through writing, which does not obey any generic rules. The concept is fascinating. To begin with, her use of Spanish rather than English is itself an epistemological strategy to subvert the relationship between power and knowledge by claiming for the subaltern the authority to produce theory and the right to speak truth from the margins. Through this practice, women of color become epistemic agents whose social embeddedness plays a crucial role in shaping what we know and are permitted to know about ourselves and the world. Autohistoria is not autobiography. Conventionally, autobiography tells the story of a unique individual who pursues the ideals of autonomy, self-realization, authenticity, and the transcending of both social and historical difference to become an expression of a universal human nature. Autohistoria, in contrast, conceives of the self as having a history, as a product of colonial history specifically, constituted at the crossroads of multiple historical events, suggesting that no self emerges outside history, beyond culture, because we all inherit languages, traditions, myths, saberes y haceres, which we may adopt to reject on our journey to self-autonomy. It is autohistoria, after all, a form of self-writing, which explodes genres by combining biography, poetry, history, dialogue, hearsay. For Ansaldúa, as for many of the writers in this bridge, writing is a way of creating interwoven and individual and collective identities. Personal experiences, revised and in other ways redrawn, become a lens with which to reread and rewrite existing cultural stories. It is with stories that we make sense of ourselves and others and how we can piece together a future. These are some of the ways in which two books bridge the distance between theory and practice. By the late 1970s, women's studies were on their way to becoming an accepted academic discipline, as Bell Hooks reminds us. Yet in this process of institutionalization, many women of color, working class and lesbian, lost visibility, an omission redressed by this bridge, which directly addresses the racism and other internalized prejudices of straight white feminist academics, which serve to perpetuate interlocking systems of oppression. In her essay, Japanese-American teacher and poet Mitsuya Yamada reminds us that, and I quote, "Part of being invisible is refusing to separate the actor from their actions, and demanding that they be responsible for them," end of quote. This bridge confronts us with our own misconceptions about ourselves by transforming us into witnesses of the pain caused by our own racism, sexism, and homophobia. In her foreword to the second edition of this bridge, Moraga admits discouraged, and I quote, that the dream of a unified third world feminist movement in this country, as we conceived of it when we first embarked on the project of this book, seemed more possible somehow. In the last 3 years, I have learned that third world feminism does not provide the kind of easy political framework that women of color are running to in droves. We are not such a natural affinity group as women who have come together out of political necessity. The idea of third world feminism has proved to be much easier between the covers of a book than between real live women, end of quote. But books are powerful things. And 40 years later, they resonate still. For example, in Veronica Gago's 2019 book, Feminist International, How to Change Everything, we find the notion of situated thinking, defined as inevitably a feminist mode of thought, and I quote, "If the history of these feminist struggles for all their victories and defeats has taught us anything, it is that the potencia of thought always has a body. The body is a constant and collective, even when individual composition, one that assembles experiences, expectations, resources, trajectories, and memories," end of quote. On the other hand, Sayag Valencia describes transfeminisms as, and I quote, "network movements that display a consideration of the transit states of gender, migration, cross-cultural context, vulnerability, race, and class as transversal spaces to build emancipatory alliances against cis, heteropatriarchal, and racist violence," end of quote. These are traces from the global south of this bridge and borderlands. I will end here then to allow time for the other interventions, and I hope to have an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Nati, por esta estupenda ponencia, and I will switch into English. You have been giving us a very powerful presentation to vindicate theory as a tool of cultural and political transformation. Also, I believe it is an excellent framework to start this discussion. And let me just mention that it is also very relevant to say that along your presentation, you have focused on Gloria Sansaldua's literature, which is not only very powerful and appealing, but for me, it is a weapon to decolonize the mind. You mentioned around that, but I believe that you said a lot of relevant concepts that are providing women and LGBTQ groups with a set of weapons. I mean, the way we communicate and the way they are communicating to broader audiences, and some of them very conflictive audiences, is truly very powerful in current times. And I appreciate that we are coming here precisely to focus on that, insisting that in places such as UNAM, such movements are already ongoing, but I think that it needs to be followed by a transnational perspective. And I know that you are going to be talking about that. So let me give the floor, because I'm not an expert on this, but I get so emotional because I feel like I am with you in this. So let me give the floor to Professor Rita Urquijo. Yeah, you want them in? Okay. So they have, I mean, I'm just the chair here, so. Well, let me give the floor to Demian Pritchard. Demian teaches ninth grade history and ethnic and gender studies at Oakwood School in Los Angeles. She earned her PhD from UC San Diego, and before returning to high school teaching, earned tenure after teaching US Latinx literature at Southern Connecticut State University. She has also been a visiting assistant professor at Wesleyan University and also in Connecticut. So welcome, and I hope to be working together from now on into the future. Welcome, welcome, Demian.
Thank you. I hope so too. I hope so too. And before I dive in, I also want to say thank you. I'm really honored to be here. And it's been a while since I've spoken in front of any audience other than teenagers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. And but lovely. And I also just want to quickly say that I really appreciate you responding to what we've heard so far. With the language of thinking of Ansaldúa as a weapon to decolonize the mind, because I actually think that that's a really apropos transition into what I'm sharing, because I think that she has been exactly that for so many of my students, which is part of what I'm talking about today. Okay, so thank you for being here. And all right. When I was teaching US Latinx literatures in Connecticut, I started conducting a classroom experiment once a semester. On that day, I would enter, write notes on the board in Spanish. And to be clear, this was a US Latinx literature class taught in an English department. I would turn from the board and start speaking in Spanish. The native speakers of Spanish in the class would be following with ease, of course. Those who were English speaking but studied Spanish, the majority of the class, would be struggling to follow. And those who never studied Spanish or who were only in the first year of study would be completely lost. I would then lead an actual lesson in Spanish on whatever reading I had assigned for that day. I started with basic questions. What's your name? Where do you live? And moved on to more complicated ones. For example, questions about literary interpretation. I engaged fluent students and had sustained academic conversations with them. And to shake things up even more, I would identify and name students who were obviously exceptional, those who were just fine, normal, and those who needed special education, which was all based on linguistic ability in Spanish, of course. As I'm sure you might be thinking, this was in great part inspired by Jane Elliott's Blue Eye, Brown Eye activity with her third grade class from April of 1968, with a bit of a linguistic twist. To offer a little context, you should know that in Connecticut, the Latinx population is predominantly Caribbean, Dominican, and Puerto Rican, and thus I had several such students in my Latinx literature classes. The first time I taught this, and to be honest, every time I did it, and I did it for many years, a group of white students, not all, but generally most, got very angry. They felt that I had taken class time from them, that I had stolen a block of their education. They felt that they got racism and discrimination and didn't need to be made to feel ignorant in order to drive the lesson home. One student even spoke in German the whole class. But after the angry white voices, I remember one Puerto Rican student who started crying. She said through her tears that that class on that day was the first time in her entire life that she got to feel like the smart kid in class. Let me say that again. This was a college student, one who supposedly made it, right? On a path to educational empowerment, and presumably thus one who had done well enough in high school to be in college. And yet that one class on that one day was the first time she ever felt like the smart kid in class. These are things we know. We know that BIPOC students are more likely to finish high school if they see themselves reflected in the material they're taught and in the educators who teach them. We know this is not in dispute. We know that effective bilingual education programs also keep students in school. And yet, as long as I can remember, as long as I've been paying attention anyways, and likely longer, it's precisely programs like those that always come under fire in state educational programs. There are so many examples. Arizona's attack on their ethnic and Chicano studies programs in 2010 programs that were inspiring and motivating students. There was the California attack on bilingual education in the form of Prop 227 in 1998, and then more Massachusetts, Arkansas, Arizona, and then more that I probably don't even know about. And today, we see this again in the form of nationwide attacks on critical race theory, the name given to any and all forms of education that dare to tell the uncomfortable racial truths of our national history. Indeed, in late January of this year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis famously backed a bill, SB 148, which was also approved by the state's educational committee, that would, quote, prohibit public schools and private businesses from inflicting discomfort on white people during lessons or training about discrimination, unquote. You likely heard about this. It was big news. They even called it the Stop Woke Act. Yeah, seriously. And yes, the Florida House of Representatives passed the bill in February. And yes, it does actually sound like an Onion article, but it's not. For about 5 years at my previous job, which was another private high school in Los Angeles, I taught advanced placement language and composition. That's for 11th graders. A class that was not about any particular content, but just about development and demonstration of specific writing skills. For several years in that class, we included Ansaldúa in the curriculum. And without fail, just like my language experiment, there were students, always white, who responded to Ansaldúa's writing with anger. They were angry that she wrote in languages other than English and did not provide translations for them. So it's really actually not that much Spanish in her text. And they easily could have looked up words and phrases or even asked fluent classmates. Like my Connecticut University students, these Los Angeles high school students so deeply embodied a sense of entitlement that they felt they could decide what did or did not count as acceptable education. I think too of the stunning displays of angry parents, faces of fury we've seen in the news, parents in school board meetings across the nation who seek to protect their children from the damaging effects of education that includes discussion of structural racism that might make their children uncomfortable. I see those faces and I wonder, how do we measure their anger, their fear, their discomfort against the tears of that first Puerto Rican student of mine in Connecticut, who again, for the first time, felt like the smart one in the room? I haven't done that Spanish language activity since returning to high school teaching about 10 years ago. What I have been doing, however, is working with high school students for about 6 years to take them to the annual conference of the National Association of Chicanx Studies, NOX, the NOX conference. Though I invite any student to participate, so far only Latinx students have responded. I proposed this plan to my former school about 8 years ago, and finally 7 years ago, they said they would fund it. Selling the idea of attending an academic conference with mostly university professors and graduate students was hard at first with high school students, and most high school teachers actually too. They don't really have any concept of academic conferences. My first year, however, I did get 3 students and I mentored them. I got each one a copy of Ansaldúa's Borderlands, as it is the most widely referenced text at Knox every year. And I had them read it little by little, responding personally to Ansaldúa's writing. And as they responded, they built their own mini memoirs, punctuated by Ansaldúa's blend of history, theory, poetry, and personal narrative, following her model, using their lives to come to a deeper understanding of themselves and their identities. In 2016, my first time doing this, I took 3 students to Denver. They came back transformed, raving about their experience to classmates. Since then, I have traveled to 4 conferences with students and have attended 2 on Zoom, taking so far 41 Latinx high school students to this conference. Each year, they read Ansaldúa and we meet regularly to speak about their reactions to her text and simply chat and connect. And increasingly, I offer history to contextualize their readings. Sometimes we watch documentaries, read poetry, sometimes short stories. They write about themselves, their families, narratives of migration, of family separation and reconnection, of being light or dark-skinned Latinx, of rigid or not so rigid gender expectation, of non-normative sexualities, of struggles to make peace with home and family. They dive deep, and then they offer their formal presentations, sharing their stories with a predominantly Latinx scholarly audience who always responds with profound admiration and affirmation of them and their work. You're a beautiful example of that, by the way.
Dr. Anita Revilla Tijerina in the audience.
Yes. I wish I had been able to offer an experience like this one to my Connecticut student of so long ago, so that she could have had more than one day of feeling like the smart one in the classroom. Just recently, out of the blue, as I sat with one of my current students, my current Knox students, doing prep work for the conference, I received the following text from a former Knox student who's now in college at Tulane in New Orleans. Quote, and this is the text she sent to me. It just popped up when I was sitting there with the other ones. It was like this beautiful convergence. So she wrote, Dr. Pritchard, can I just say thank you for opening up my world to Knox, Gloria Ansaldúa, Sherry Moraga, and chicanx literature. The longer I spend in college, the more I realize how much my work always comes back to Chicanx theater and how it intersects with Latinx studies. You bought me the book Teatro Chicana or Chicano at Knox my second year. That book is my Bible, LOL. I'm going to be working as an intern for the Latino Theater Company and also the Canales Abiertos Caribbean Theater Group this summer. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have found the passion I now have for this kind of work. I appreciate you. And I'm not meaning to emphasize myself here, but the words that brought her to where she is. Another student, undocumented at the time of her presentation, shared with me this week that, quote, Knox was a space where she could talk about why I changed I to she, where she could talk about her experience as a first-gen immigrant in everyday society without having to apologize to anyone for making them feel bad about their political views or beliefs, or for exaggerating or milking her experience, unquote. And yet another, and this is my third and final share, yet another, off to college just this year, graduating right now, shared that quote, I owe a lot to that whole experience. And I know that if it wasn't for a space like Knox, I would totally hate myself. It was a space where I felt safe, where I didn't need to keep up this whole other persona I created going to my private school. I didn't feel like everybody's eyes were on me judging. Learning about Latinx studies and all these authors and poets and activists who look like me doing the work that I want to do when I get older was so empowering. In short, I guess I would say that gave me a strong sense of self. It's because of that class, like where we're doing the prep work, that I feel brave enough to talk about social injustice. And I know I cannot be ignored in a classroom, even if I'm the only Latina in there, unquote. I hope their voices reflect back to you the power of Ansaldúa, of Latinx studies, and of fighting like hell against this intellectual and political backlash. We owe our students at least that much. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Demian, for this brilliant presentation. I believe this session is a very virtuous one because Nati was talking about theory, and basically we understand, we tend to understand or think that, I mean, to understand and manage theory, you need to be at the summit of the ladder. But I have always thought that it is absolutely necessary for us academics if we see ourselves as activists. And I believe the four of us are kind of activists. You could ask my children and they would say, my mom has always been nuts, but anyway. I think that if we academic activists do not develop the skills to communicate positively with the youngest of the youth, that is to say, the teenagers, but also even with children. But for me, it's a huge challenge, basically, because I'm just about to have my first two grandchildren, and I've been thinking about it. How should I mean, what can I follow this conversation with both of my grandchildren? Boys, by the way. And so I am also very worried about not speeding up a relation with people that are teaching at elementary school. That I think it is also a conversation that needs to be open if we do not have the skills or the time to work directly with children. But I think that your presentation is basically touching that possibility. And you are discovering very powerful voices among the very young. So I think it was brilliant. And I remember, let me tell you a story. Before the four of us, we were here, we had a meeting, and I said, we are going to organize this session in a very different way, not a masculine way that they tell you, this is going to be the title of the session. So you have like a, yeah, you have to fit in that. If you need to manage, but that is the title. So it was so good because they were basically discussing, and the title of the session, it was chosen by the ones who were going to present. And it was absolutely, they haven't never before, Demian and yeah, but not Nati. And this is truly coming into the real world as it's been done so very differently. So thank you so much. I appreciate your both of your presentations. And now,
Aquí estamos.
ahora paso la palabra. Let me just read a little bit about who is Rita Urquijo Ruiz, also a fantastic person.
Gracias.
She's a Mexicana Chicana, fronteriza, queer educator, translator, writer, activist, and performer from Sonora, Mexico, and Southern California, a binational, both of you binational actors. And maybe we are also transnational at least. She's a professor. Rita is a professor at Trinity University who teaches Mexican, Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx, and Latino, Latinx literatures, cultures, gender, sexuality, theater, and performance studies. She is the author of Wild Tongues, Transnational Mexican Popular Culture. And today she will read her story titled First Visit, about being undocumented as an undergraduate student, which is in the forthcoming anthology, Somewhere We Are Human, Authentic Voices on Migration, Survival and New Beginnings, co-edited by Reina Grande and Sonia Guinanzaca. Welcome,
Gracias.
welcome, Reina.
Gracias. When we were coming up with the ideas for the panel, we agreed that we were going to try to do everything at once, right? Do the theoretical framework, do the examples of education in the classroom. And then I said, why don't I read the story that will be published about my memoir, right? And this is really just to push me into continuing to do that creative work that I love doing, but that because I teach and do a million other things, I put aside. Mil gracias to UNAM LA, mil gracias obviamente a ti, Silvia, Ricardo, a todo el personal que ha sido tan lindo y tan linda aquí en Los Ángeles. De todo corazón, mil gracias por traernos aquí. Comenzamos. First visit. Mom cries for you almost every night since you left, your oldest sister says. You often fight the urge to cry too, especially on Sunday afternoons, when your life in Mexico when your family in Mexico gets together and life goes on without you. It's been 5 years since you crossed the border to chase the dream of learning English to become a bilingual secretary in Hermosillo. You were 16 then. Now you have bigger goals. It is spring 1992 and you're a sophomore at the University of California, Riverside. You never thought you would make it this far. And you don't want to risk it. But there's a longing inside you that grows by the day to see your loved ones, your family, but especially your mom. She'd been raising your 10 siblings by herself since your dad died. But with a third grade education, she doesn't make enough money to support everyone. Your dream is to graduate from UCR, help out your family, and maybe even spare your mom the fate of being a maid into her old age. You've wanted to go to Mexico for some time now, but getting caught at the border on the way back being deported, and losing out on a bachelor's degree from a famous US university is too big of a risk. Not to mention jeopardizing your chances of legalizing your status. Mr. Porter, your math teacher at Artesia High in LA, was so moved by your undocumented situation that he and his family took you in for your junior and senior years of high school. With their support and thousands of dollars in lawyers' fees, you began a 7-year process of getting your papers. But you know, you can't wait that long. Something moves you to see your family back in Sonora. Yet, how would you get back? Your UCR friend Alex says, go for it. Just tell the migra at the border that you are a US citizen. In your 2-year language immersion with the Porters, somehow you picked up their Southern California accent, and your friends tease you that you sound like a gringa when you speak in English. You let out one big sigh and smile and say, fuck it, I'm going to Mexico. And so you do. You're nervous when the Gonzalezes, the first family you stayed with when you arrived, pick you up in their van at your campus apartment, where you now have a big room with a door that locks. Long gone are your childhood days of sharing one doorless room with 10 other people. You say hi to everyone, get your luggage into the van, and squeeze somewhere in the middle. You're talkative and fidgety because you're excited and nervous to be heading home. You don't pay attention to the 11-hour drive, except when the old, beautiful saguaros all along the Sonora Desert begin to welcome you home. When you get there that Saturday, everyone in your barrio comes out to see you. Irene, your childhood best friend, surprises you with a beautiful floral arrangement. Receiving roses is rare in your neighborhood, especially if it's not for a funeral. You go get your camera to capture the moment, but your tia Rita stops you. Mijita, get a clean sheet and hang it on the clothesline as a background. She wants you to cover the unsightly yard, discarded furniture, old tin and aluminum cans, piles of cardboard ready for recycling, and trash to be collected soon. As you imagine showing the pictures to your friends in California, you're relieved by your tia's idea and run to go get the bed sheet and help hang it. 5 years of paved roads and fancy houses with manicured front and backyards have offered you much comfort. You chastised yourself for being too gringa. You swore not to complain about anything that might embarrass your family. About 30 people, family, friends, and neighbors pose for pictures with you in your 1990s hairdo and big glasses. You're still attempting to stay in the closet a little longer when you're asked if you have a boyfriend. Years later, you'll notice that in one of those pictures, your mom is smiling proudly and holding you tightly by your waist. You'll indulge in this tender moment and recall it when you miss her the most. If you close your eyes, you can still feel your mom's strong hand, really firm hand holding you close. You can even smell the Avon perfume that she wore that day to celebrate your arrival. During lunch, everyone sits outside on chairs borrowed from the neighbors to hear you tell stories about your adventures en el otro lado. Your prima Blanca asks you to say something in English, but you don't because you don't want to be a show-off. You know that you hurt her feelings, but you'll make it up to her and give her a really cute California beach and sunset keychain later. Your nana welcomes you with her bendición, allows you to enjoy yourself and chat with everyone, but after eating, you know you'll have to face her. Finally, you overhear her saying, "Dile a la Ritelena que venga," and your stomach tenses up and you head her way. Her adobe kitchen is smaller than you remember, crowded with trinkets and bagged, dry, and canned food everywhere on every flat surface. One of your favorite things on her table is her chipped peltre azucarera with 3 little pink faded roses on it. Its 2 little handles remind you of your nana when she puts her hands on her hips before scolding someone. Fortunately, this someone was rarely you. She's waiting by the old table covered with the blue and yellow floral oilcloth. Her court of saints and virgin statue stands tall at the altar to her right. ¿Cómo te fue, mijita? How was your trip? It was fine, Nana, but it went really fast. You are so blessed to have the Gonzalezes and the Porters in your life. I am so grateful to them. You agree with your head and smile nervously as you anticipate the harder questions. Tracing the big yellow flowers on the oilcloth with your index finger, you look up at your Nana a few times. And do you have a boyfriend, mijita? I know you're old enough, but be careful because you know men only want one thing. Ay, Nana, don't say that. You know I want to finish school first. Your cheeks get hot and you look down at the image of the flowers in front of you. No, I don't have a boyfriend, not now, but I have a picture of my ex and me when we were at the high school senior prom. As you reach into your bag to choose one of the pictures, and she's already shaking her head. Reluctantly, she grabs the 5x7 of you and your ex. He wears a tuxedo with a shiny light pink cummerbund and a bow tie that matches your borrowed taffeta dress. You tried hard to fit in with your stray friends. You even let them do your makeup and stiffen your hair up with Aquanet. There's a picture of that at some point that we'll have to see. You wish you had been the one wearing the bow tie. And so years later, bow ties will become part of your signature look when you present your academic research at conferences. When you'll tell your Nana that this boy is no longer in your life, she refuses the picture. No, gracias, mijita. Give them to your sisters and your friends. Your decoy boyfriend failed. You wish you could tell her about Pilar instead, your girlfriend back in Riverside. Your Nana says she's worried about your papers. So you tell her that your best friend Lalo offered to marry you if the Porter's legalization plan takes too long. Ándale, that would be good. If you get married, especially in a church, I want a copy of that picture. I'd feel so much better if you have a man to take care of you. Así me puedo morir en paz, finalmente. You don't argue with her about her old-fashioned machismo. Not even your La Chicana studies class prepare you to persuade your grandma of how capable you are of taking care of yourself. You touch the watch that Pilar gave you and think of her nervously, but smile anyways as you get ready to go back outside. Your Nana gives you a laminated stamp of La Sombra de San Pedro to keep you safe on the way back and always. That day, as you walk away from her, you wonder what she would say or pray for if she knew about Pilar. Each day seems too short, and after visiting with at least 60 people, mostly family and friends, on Friday afternoon, you finally have your mom all to yourself. You hadn't been able to see much of her. Her middle-class bosses said that they were happy for your visit, but they couldn't pay her for that week if she didn't work. Your mom is smoking and sitting at the kitchen table preparing dinner. Pinto beans are cooking on the first gas stove that she bought herself when your dad died. The aroma of the beans fill the room. The light outside is bright, but there's only a little bit of it that the kitchen window allows inside. You can hear the usual barrio noises. Neighbors loudly talking, cumbias and norteñas at odds with each other, children playing on the street, and it all takes you back to your childhood. You remember Concha, the butch lesbian whom everyone called La Marimacha, and how you stop and stare at her. She'd secretly wink and smile at you when you walked by, and she was wearing her tight jeans, brown boots, vaquero shirt, big buckle, and a hat. You're runaway scared, but yet intrigued as your friends and your siblings bullied you. By now, your mom is almost done with the prep work and looks at you. Elena, how are things in el otro lado? They treat you okay? Tell me the truth. Are you happy? She's the only one that calls you by your middle name, especially when she's trying to be tender. Sitting at the table with some hesitation, you look at her. You're not as nervous as when you talk to your Nana, but still feel like you cannot tell her the truth. Todo mundo me trata bien, ama. You swallow the knot in your throat, delivering your best performance because you don't want to worry her. You withhold the countless moments when you made mistakes and fear that you'd be sent back. You reassure her that both of you made the right decision when she encouraged you to pursue your dreams in the United States. ¿Estás segura, mijita? Sí, ama, I swear. I'm so glad. Oye, and do you have a boyfriend? No, ama, I don't want a boyfriend. I'm all about school. You try hard to contain the smile as you think one more time of your Pilar and the fleeting possibility of coming out to your mom at this moment. Qué bueno, mijita. She doesn't look at you as she chops up some onion but after a moment, you feel a little bit brave and say, oiga, ma, ¿sabe qué? Yo nunca me quiero casar con un hombre. Maybe I'll have a child or two, but I don't want to get married. Without hesitation, your mom looks at you and says, pues, mijita, finish your degree. Elena, you don't need to marry anybody if you don't want to. You'll be able to take care of yourself, and the more you study, the better off you'll be to live the life you want. She fries some garlic and onions, and the aroma promises a delicious dish of Mexican rice, beans, and enchiladas sonorenses. You smile because to you, your mother just gave you her blessing to be you. And in your mind, this means to be queer. You also know that this is probably the best you can do to come out to her. Sunday morning arrives too soon. You must return with the Gonzalez's to the San Diego border. Before getting into the van again, you stand in front of your mom and of your nana, and each one of them draws an invisible sign of the cross on your forehead. They have packed tacos and big Sonora-style flour tortillas made especially for the trip north. Your nana gives you an additional santito, a laminated copy of San Peregrino, to carry with you in your backpack for a safe return. Decades later, you'll transfer these two santitos from each butch leather wallet you carry in your pants back pocket. I still have them with me. You had called your UCR friends on Wednesday to make sure that everything was going as planned. The van will drop you off a few blocks from the border crossing, and you'll take a taxi to Calle Revolucion, where Cuca, Teto, and Alex will be waiting for you. When you arrive, they set out to, let me read that again. When you arrive, they set out to get you drunk because they know what a chicken you are and they don't want to get in trouble. Cuca has a green card ready and is going to claim your luggage. She's getting ready to talk about all of her adventures in Guanajuato, which was a total lie. Cuca is the best actress in your Teatro Quinto Sol group at UCR, so you know that she can pull this off perfectly. After 2 straight tequila shots and 1 tequila popper, you're ready to go. Cuca and Alex hold your arm, each one of your arms, and call you lightweight, and they laugh at your silly drunken jokes on your way to the parking lot. When you get in the car, you sit next to Cuca. You start fidgeting and become quiet. You begin sweating and it's hard to breathe. She holds your hand, squeezes gently, it helps. Teto is driving and Alex is in the front with him. Cuca sits behind the driver's seat for the migra officer to see her clearly. The line of cars feels endless, but when there's one car left in front of you, your heart accelerates and you feel sober in spite of all the tequila in your system. Your face feels hot as the gringo migra officer asks, country of citizenship? Teto, Alex, and you take turns saying US, and Cuca comes through beautifully. She's in charge of answering all the questions after she says, Mexico, and gives the green card to the officer. He steps into the booth, types up some stuff, and later gives Cuca back her green card and waves the car through. After rolling up the windows, and this is the way we used to roll up the windows then. After rolling up the windows and driving slowly over all the speed bumps, all of you take a deep breath, laugh, and high-five each other. Interstate 5 is busy as you leave San Isidro. You'll be in Riverside this evening. Shortly after your visit home, your mom will be diagnosed with a lung cancer that takes her in 6 months. But for now, you feel that your family's prayers worked and all your dreams are still within reach. Pilar will be happy to see you and you'll embrace her for a long time as you rest in her arms tonight. Gracias.
Thank you so very much, Rita Elena, if I may.
Right.
You have been incredible. I mean, having the possibility to share your own story with all these magic words, and it was like if I was listening to your mom and your nana speaking to you, and this has been a very powerful and moving story. So thank you very much, and I appreciate very much this opportunity to meet you personally and to start working together. Feel welcome, all of you. And so the floor is, before I open the floor to the audience, I don't know if you have any, if you would like to comment within ourselves. So, I mean, I don't know if you would like to say something to any reactions to their presentations. Yeah. Super tiny. Yeah, no. So start thinking on your question.
I just could not help but reflect on how they spoke to one another, all of them, even though the genre was so really different with each one. And that takes me back to Ansaldúa and Autohistoria Teoría, because I feel like what I was talking about was the power of students reconnecting with their own, right? And how their autohistoria and their theorizing like empowers them, puts them on a path to themselves. And then Rita's like interwoven, intersectional, multi-layered narrative of I forget the title already. First visit, but it's not just a first. There's so much more going on. Is a beautiful example of that too. So I was just really struck with how all three really spoke to each other.
Well, I wanted to say something about your experience because I thought that was fascinating. And I think one of the things that I appreciate and admire of what you've done is that you don't talk down to the student. I mean, you don't think your students are stupid, because they're younger, because they're younger. And, and I think that the whole point of the sort of, bell hooks and this bridge is to say, I mean, you don't have to have a PhD to theorize. You have to theorize your everyday life because this is how you make sense of your life. It's not just a sort of jumble. There's something you can, to be able to change your life, you have to understand what it, how it is that it works and why it works the way it works. And you have to connect it, your own specific experience to the other experience of others. And I think that is actually quite difficult to do, especially if you're younger and, only think about yourself. So I just think that what you're doing is precise. I mean, you're putting into practice what, all the women of color in this bridge call my back do as well through writing. And I just think that's admirable. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
And if I may just do the last comment before we open it up to the audience, I was very fortunate to be able to be here since Wednesday evening because we had agreed, Damien and I had agreed that I was going to visit 3 of her classes. She was teaching 3 classes on Thursday yesterday, and I was invited to do my story, right? And so there were 2 ninth graders, and then we had a lunch with different ones and different students from different grades, and then we closed it with the 11th graders and the 12th graders. And it's just magical to be able to have the opportunity to visit a classroom like yours. And so we can talk more about that if
Next time
anyone's.
you have to invite.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
I would love it. Absolutely. So we missed that opportunity. So we need to be back together again pretty soon, okay?
That I would love that.
That is a commitment. So please. Yep.
Facebook.
Oh, okay.
So, well, I'm gonna share it. So this is from
No te oímos
Mexico.
bien.
This is from Mexico. So
Para que oigan ellos también.
it's Jose asked if I think this is an open question. So it says that it's in English. So which are the benefits of having more freedom in a country like
Más
America?
fuerte.
He says that which are the benefits of having more freedom in a country like America? Do everyday struggles with these issues are easier? How can we raise and speak loudly and more in a more closed society, like maybe not only Mexico, but or even in here in the United States, I don't know, maybe a more close society. So is it easier in one place than another? And what advices I think would you give to many other people in other countries?
I'll open. That's a huge question. And I think it's sort of impossible to answer with any sort of simple or clear response. And I can't answer thinking binationally or transnationally because my experience is so very US centric. But it does strike me that even in the United States, there are more open and more closed spaces. And I know I'm really lucky because I'm in a school that lets me do whatever the hell I want, excuse me, whatever the heck I want. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. And so I can do this work with students and it's not a problem. And in California, we now have an ethnic studies requirement in high school at the state level. Is huge deal, very different from other places in the country right now. And yeah, the long list, pretty much almost everywhere. And so, but I guess I don't know the answer to the question how, because at least my work with students, I haven't had to, well, I have a little bit at my previous school, manipulate and bully to try to get to do what I wanted, but I didn't at first get fired for that. Whereas other people would straight up lose their jobs. But I do know that across the nation, there are teachers who find ways, if outside traditional classrooms, bring voices to students. And I think, again, in the very much the high school context, but in ways that empower them. And these stories and these voices, like the smallest thing, really can be transformational in a teen's life. So I think that that's a really great question. And I guess I respond with my meandering non-response, but very difficult to answer, but very important question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you want
I mean, I think, again, it's a huge question and I don't even know if it's possible to sort of have a standard notion of what freedom is, because it's very contextual. And there is a lot of unfreedom. And I suppose you have to wonder I mean, where you are free and where you are unfree, because I don't think it's ever either or. So I think in both societies, there are groups of people that are less free than other groups of people. And I would think that we'd probably agree that most minorities, for example, women, precisely the sort of women of color that are writing in this bridge, I think are probably still, subjected to all kinds of, I like the word unfreedom, oppressions, and children. So I don't know. I think that there are sort of communities or groups of people that are probably more marginalized in both societies. But I don't think I would venture any other generalization. Sorry,
It's a hard one.
it is a hard one.
I think that for me, what's important to highlight is that no matter what the notion of freedom is in this country or in other countries, there are always fantasies, right? There are always creations, and they don't necessarily apply to everybody. And so as we taught freedom, and we're like, yes, we're free, we're currently going backwards in our civil rights all across the nations in the world, right? Not just in the United States or in Mexico or in Brazil, but the country, the world itself is moving backwards because of these backlashes and fears of queers and fears of minorities, which are no longer minorities, right? But the others and the othered is the idea of mayhem, and that the powers that be are very, very afraid of what these voices and these stories represent in terms of demanding those freedoms that were supposed to be here for a long time and haven't been. Does that, I hope that that covers part of it.
Can I say something? I do believe that what each one of you have said is exactly what I think, but I also believe that we need to start thinking about ourselves as a point of a departure in terms of recognizing that we have been so privileged. And so that we need to have a commitment in not to bajar la guardia. I don't know how do you say that in English? But
Bring your guard down. Take your guard.
yeah, because especially if we have the possibility to work with the younger generations, that is one of our mission. I mean, it needs to be a commitment and a passion. And I think that the sense of awareness about what you have mentioned is truly needed. And so we need to find ways to open this dialogue among all these clouds that are coming in. This would be the only way to keep going, I mean, keep walking, no? And try to escape from fear. I mean, the world itself is not only messy, but I think that there are some other very virtuous voices. And I tend to think that among all these, we have, for example, in New Zealand, the First Minister. She's, for me, a revolutionary woman. And there are other examples, but unfortunately, those good examples are not shown on an everyday basis in the mass media. And so this is one of the big problems, that we are truly facing very dramatic times, but we need not to miss the big picture. There are so many things that are also happening. We'll see what is going on tomorrow and the day after here in Los Angeles. All the women have been, and all these activists from different ethnic, religious, and the LGBT, they are coming together and speaking their voices out loudly. So we need not to no vivir con miedo, o sea, which I think that is the most difficult thing to conquer, ¿no? Si estamos a la altura de defender eso, and I think that we have to. It's, no? Thank you.
Thank you all. It's interesting how freedom suddenly became a topic here in this discussion, something that we can always take for granted in this approach. So there's another question that this may be suitable for both you, Rita, and Damian, and there's another question then later for Rita, for Professor Rita. So this question also in the same sense of freedom also ask about is how important is to address this situation.
Perdón, no se escucha, Ricardo.
Sorry. is the question is how important is to address this situation in early years of adolescence, and how do you feel you are contributing to raising the voice for this cause? And here I think there's a bit of broadly answer for answering. There's a space for, because it's both maybe here in California, is your experience, right? But also, which will be your advice to teachers in Mexico regarding this issue? So this may be also something you could approach Professor Nati and Damien.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, tough questions.
It's a beautiful question. I do want to first respond by saying, I'm not sure that I'm in a position to give advice to teachers in Mexico because I have no knowledge of the curriculum, how it works. And I don't know how much or how little freedom teachers have to what gets taught in the classroom. I know that I have lots of friends. I have a few friends who teach elementary school. So the question, like, how young and how important is it? And if I understood the question correctly, I would say that I believe it's not just marginally important, but deeply essential for students of all ages to be exposed to materials that ask them to look at life, at the world, at each other differently than they've been brought up to. So I don't think there's an age too young to think about race, to think about class, to think about gender, think about sexuality. I think that there's different forms of introducing it at different ages, but I don't think there is any age too young. Angry parents would disagree in other states, but they're wrong. So I think that in elementary school, and I suppose if there's the freedom to do so, even in middle school and high school, if you don't have control over your curriculum, if you have to teach what you're told, where you do have control is in your library. And even if not in your school library, assuming you have a library, in a classroom library. So I think that there's always the opportunity to provide reading materials. And I guess, we're up here, we're big believers in books and stories and poems to offer to students. That student that I mentioned earlier, the one who cried, the Puerto Rican student who said that it was the only day that she'd ever felt like the smart kid in class. She also said that she writes poetry. And she said that her high school teacher, so she grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and went to public school. And her high school teacher told her when she found out that she was writing poetry, don't bother. There are no Puerto Rican authors. There is no Puerto Rican literature. And this, right? Right. So had a classroom had available to her stories, books, opportunity, even in a rigidly defined curriculum, like that would be my advice is, and also, like, even though it's sort of silly, what you put on the walls really matters. And I think that there's, even at the high school level, but from elementary to high school, like those little details can be powerfully transformative and empowering for kids, even though it might seem like such a small deal. When I went from university teaching to high school teaching, I was like, what is this? Why are they putting, who cares what we put on the walls? Because, like, you don't do that at the university level. It's sort of silly. But I realized that when I change the environment, even for high school students, they feel different when they walk in the room. They feel more safe, more comfortable, more welcomed. And as I took more control of my classroom environment, students told me they felt like that was a space they wanted to hang out, a space where they felt like they could have a voice just by being in the room. So I think control over the environment, I guess I said a lot and I didn't think I had a lot to say, and control over the books, even if you don't have curricular control, would be advice I would give.
I think not.
Oh, sorry.
powerful answer. And yes, so not controlling the curriculum, but better in not quite having control of the libraries. So maybe this is maybe you can add some words, Professor Nati.
Just Nati. No,
Just-
no, professor, please. It makes me feel very old.
You did said
Or older.
just for opening your you said you don't have to have your pH to theorize. You theorize every day, especially when younger. So it is actually having this freedom to when you have the means, right? Maybe in the adolescence or even before, how as Professor Demian said, so this is a powerful answer, and well, of course, your words will be really powerful, undoubtedly, because it is your words that you said about theorizing. And yes, when younger, they theorize a lot about everything, and these matters are especially of importance for their identity, right? And how they approach it. And that is something that, of course, in every place will be much appreciated.
I was thinking that one of the things that I think our students missed out because they didn't go to university for what we haven't seen each other for 2 years. We've only just started to come back to face-to-face classes. And one of the things that I think my students haven't done is to theorize because I mean, I seem to remember when I was a student that I would just sort of lie around on the grass thinking about life. I thought I was having these deep thoughts and, about life, which, I wish I had had. But that's a way of sort of becoming very self-aware of yourself as a person that thinks, and that you can think about your life and the lives of others. And it's, I think one of the great losses in these students' life or this generation at the university is that they haven't had that opportunity to just sort of lie on the grass and chat, basically. I wanted to address the issue of the canon because, of course, the canon, I mean, I teach in the literature department, so we have to teach certain, when we have to do Shakespeare, we have to do, et cetera. But for the past few years, I would say maybe 7 or 8, the contents of the courses have changed dramatically because our students are demanding different types of reading. So it's not even like that we want them to, start to read other things. They have actually decided that they want to read other things. And at the moment, I teach a research seminar and let them choose what to work on rather than me choosing for them. And they choose a wide variety of really interesting work that it's non-canonical. They write about, young writers who are publishing their own work on blogs or, on the internet. And that's fine. I have no problem with, literature that's not like real literature or whatever that means, as long as they find it interesting and meaningful, because ultimately that's what I want them to. I want them to be completely fascinated by what they do, basically. So I'm very open to reading whatever they choose to read, basically, and ask them to bring their own stuff. And, yeah.
I wanted to bring us back to the children in Mexico and what they could be reading. And it all sounds like self-promotion, but for me, it's always about making a escándalo con propósito is what I say, right? And the idea is that when I promote my work, I'm promoting a bunch of other people's work. And so I just happen to have another copy of a children's book written by these 2 amazing Chicanas from San Antonio. Their names are Selena Gonzalez and Adriana Garcia is the illustrator. And Adriana Garcia is a muralist. And so she's an incredible, just an incredible artist. And I just happened to be a metiche and they asked me to translate this librito. And it's called Donde las Maravillas Crecen, or Where Wonder Grows in English. But this is just an excuse to move us in the direction of all these other children's books that are coming out of the Chicana, Chicano, Latina, Latino, Latinx, especially LGBTQAI+ community. There's a lot of us queers that are writing libritos for children and translating them so that we have alternative curriculum, right? And so when I told Nati about this other book of 41 undocumented stories that is gonna come out in June, Nati immediately says, call this library and this bookstore in DF and tell them to make sure that they get the copy in Spanish. I would love to just call them and say, there's all these other children's books that I would love for you also to sell at your bookstore, right? And so I think that these transnational collaborations have to persist, have to continue. Silvia, we couldn't thank you enough for bringing us together in this manner, right? Because all of us are so hungry to bring in all these amazing stories together and these compassionate and compelling and difficult stories together in English and in Spanish, and hopefully in native languages as well, right? So that it's not just these two canonical languages. And so let's continue to look at children's literature that is being produced on both sides of the border and see what can we borrow from each other, right? And then I know the books are extremely expensive, especially in Mexico. And so what do we do to make these books accessible? How do we use social media? How do we use any other aspect of accessibility so that it is not just the money that they're gonna pay for a tiny little librito, right? I think I'm gonna stop there and see if there's questions from the audience here present, so I'm not sure.
Let
I
me just
tiene una
say that we thank you very much all the questions on Facebook Live, and now the floor is for the human beings that are sharing the same territorial space and the same hour here in Mexico. It's already 9 p.m. I guess. No, yeah. So please.
Can you all hear me okay? My question initially, I think when I was thinking about it, was about how moved I feel by all of the stories, recognizing though that the setting is academia. And so I find myself feeling really inspired and thinking how unfortunate that there's such a small minority of our people that have access to that kind of learning and self-reflection experience. And then very specifically, as I continued to listen, and I heard you talk about, this, the loss of not having the opportunity to just sit around and theorize, to just talk, to be together. I thought very explicitly about an experience I had with my mother. And there's this big divide between us because I'm a first generation college student in my family, and my family supported that and wanted that to happen. But there's also a big divide that happened between me and my family because of that. And so I, at one point, found myself in a conversation with my mom where I was, I'll say, just expressing sadness about the world and my place in it, and the impact on people in a very kind of generic way, but deep sadness nonetheless. And my mother pointed out just the luxury of having the ability to think and to reflect and to be in my head. And it was a really powerful moment for me because she did it very tenderly. It wasn't ugly. But I realized that what I was feeling was due to a different kind of understanding that the education had afforded me. And as much as I wanted that to bring me closer to my family, it actually kind of separated us. And so at the same time that I have this awakening in a very intimate way, it's almost like I have it in a language, it's like a language divide, similar to the English language, English-Spanish divide. I have another language and they don't know it. And I desperately want to share what I've learned in this other language with them, but they don't know the language. So all of that to say, I'm just curious about any of your thoughts on how, given that we have these opportunities in the academic setting to do this thinking and to find the power in it, how do we take that to everyone who isn't there with us on campus?
I think it's a shot in terms of thinking that for me, even though Facebook now is for elders, right? And it's for like older people, I wanted to take really good advantage of Facebook to communicate with my family. in Mexico, right? My blood family. And to be able to put on those videos and books and, on my feed and connect people. And I did it very specifically because, and I was telling Damien this the other night, because I wanted one of your classes actually, I wanted the younger generation to have access to some of the queer stuff that we're doing here in the US and in Spanglish and in all these languages. I wanted my nieces and nephews and my grandnieces and nephews, the next generations, to be aware of what the heck I'm doing in academia, right? And to me, the idea is always that because I'm first gen everything, right? Student, professor, author, whatever, I can't never forget where I came from. So the idea is that I have to be also an activist and that I have to be connecting to the communities always outside of the university. For me, there's no university without the community and vice versa, right? And so Facebook becomes a platform for me to be able to just throw all that stuff in there. And I love it when I'm able to engage a 14-year-old niece, or if I'm able to send libro traficantemente, right? Like send these libritos across with one of the sisters that comes to visit in Phoenix, and I send her like 30 books for the young children in my family. And so I do understand the idea of the divide and the language and how lonely it can be when you're the first one in your family to do that. But I also think that it's those connections that we continue to keep with our younger generations and even the elders as well, and to speak it in a way that makes sense to them, right? And to say, yes, this is a very privileged position to be sad about the world, but it's also the idea that when you were worried about feeding me and I'm worried about the sadness of the world, both of us can coexist and still help each other to make space for what it is that we're doing, right? That the hunger is not just a hunger for food, but it's also a hunger for connection and a hunger for community building, and that community building can happen in any space. I hope that helps.
That was beautiful.
Feminist academic called Sarah Ahmed, and she's got a lovely book called Living a Feminist Life. And she says that feminists are always killjoys, that they're never happy. They're never happy anywhere. And they're sort of always sitting at the end of the table, at family reunions, spoiling all the fun. So you might want to think of yourself as a killjoy, which is fine. I don't think that necessarily has to be a bad thing, because all kinds of things happen in families that might or probably should not be happening in families as well. So it's a place of discomfort. She herself says that it's an uncomfortable place, but I think that one can live with that in that place with the discomfort is probably what she would suggest. And I think Ansaldu, I would also suggest as well. So I wanted to say that on the one hand. Also, I think one of the things that theory allows us to do is to put ourselves in the places of others. So it is a way of trying at least to understand it's sort of, I don't know if it helps us places, but I suppose in a sense one becomes more aware of the other, I think, in a more empathic way or less aggressive. And I think that helps to be able to engage with, to learn another language, because you don't only speak one language, you speak several now. And you might just want to translate from one language to the other. And it doesn't even have to be a spoken language. It could be an emotional language. There are other ways of communicating complex thoughts, I suppose. So don't be discouraged.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank the panelists and the host for reminding us the value of Ansaldúa and This Bridge Called My Back. And just every time I hear about people using it across borders, and she obviously was talking about a specific border, but it's across so many borders. We did an Antaldua conference in Paris that taught us even more borders. But I want to thank, the folks at UNAM for taking the initiative and having the courage to let Chicanas talk, queer Chicanas, radical Chicanas, because I think that's really brave of Rita to share her story and you all to host it in a binational context. And then I just want to witness Damien because the experiences that I've had with you and your students in the virtual world, I've just been the past 2 years at Knox, has been like, just, it gives me hope, right? It gives me the will to continue doing the work, right? And when the question was asked about freedom, I think we think about freedom externally, but I really think about freedom internally, because that's all we have control over. We don't have control over anybody else but ourselves. And I think you have given yourself and the students the freedom to be who they are, the freedom to be free of shame, which is really a big deal, right? Like that, if we can teach our students and ourselves to stop being ashamed, then that is a real deep sense of liberation. So I would invite you to talk about your journey into the high school world. I know that it must have been an interesting journey, and I'm very curious, like you are preparing these students beyond what I feel like I've been able to do in some college context. So thank you and congratulations for your work.
Not know if I live up to all those beautiful words, but thank you. That was really, whew, thank you. And I honestly, I mean, they're the amazing ones. I just give them space. But actually, the story is way too long, but I will give a little bit that I went to Berkeley as an undergrad, double majored English, Spanish, had no idea what the heck I wanted to do with my life. And when I graduated, because I could speak Spanish and I'm not a native speaker, I applied for Spanish teaching positions and ended up teaching at a private school in Los Angeles called Marlboro, an all-girls school. I actually went there too, which is probably why they hired me, frankly. And because honestly, I had no idea how to teach. So it was, they just gave a job to somebody they knew, connections. And I fell in love with teaching. But what I learned returning to a privileged school, and I had been from a family that I've really working class roots. My family does, and so I am by far the most highly educated person in my extended family. My parents, my mom and dad, neither of them finished college. And so they worked really hard to send me to a private school and give me that. And I wasn't, they had cotillion and TikTokers and all these things that like I'd never even heard of before. But when I had this deep insecurity that you talk about, this deep shame as mixed race girl, when I had been a student there, as a middle-class person, I felt like I was poor. I was not poor, but I felt that way in a context like that. So when I went back and taught there, I saw it really differently. And I found also that students of color came to me, and Black students predominantly. There were very few Latinas at the school at the time, because it was a horrifically racist place. And I found that anything I tried to do to support them, I found brick walls in every direction. And I also found that a Spanish language classroom, though super fun, I love teaching Spanish, has a lot of limitations because you can only have a certain level of conversation. I mean, their language ability only goes so far. And so then I also felt limited in that way. So that's why I actually went to graduate school and pursued a PhD with the purpose with the desire to return to high school teaching to do transformative political work. That was my intention. I kind of got lost along the way. Well, that was my, and then that's how I ended up teaching. And you know what? Professors were not supportive of that idea. Absolutely not supportive of that idea. And it was sort of life trauma that pulled me out of, I mean, I had tenure. I was going to stay there, but it was life trauma that pulled me out of that, put me back in high school. And I found actually I like it a lot better. And I will say that I'm not doing as much as I'd like to do. Like, I just feel like and plus I'm in a little private school. I mean, I am helping the less privileged in a super privileged space, kids who have tons of resources. So I also feel really ambivalent about the work that I am doing. I really appreciate your words. And I do think it matters. I do, but I'm like, gosh, I could be doing so much more. But I do want to say one thing. Rita and I shared the same dissertation advisor, Rosada Sanchez, who was not into the whole, oh, you're going to be teaching high school thing. But she also came to a panel and listened to my students one year. And afterwards gave me a big hug and said, now I understand what you're doing. And like made me cry. So thank you for your words. They really mean a lot.
Anyone else?
I think my comment is that we have to remember the families. So it's not just about working with the students in the classroom, but also working with their families. Because if we want to elevate the voices in the classroom, which might not just be the Chicanos or Chicanas, but maybe immigrants, like the newcomers in the classrooms, or just other different voices. I think it's important that we also work with their families so that they understand how to support their children at home and how to continue the same message. And also, it's important for everyone to know that this is an asset and how to leverage that. Like, for instance, families telling their students, their children, you can use this to, like in your college applications, this is gonna make you stand out from others. So kind of use your history, your culture, who you are, your identity, to highlight your assets, right? But I think families also need to have that information and that support so that they can be proud and the whole family can understand that, you know, who you are makes you unique and different, and the contributions that you can make to your community in different ways. So just kind of thinking about the whole family, not just the student in the classroom.
Anyone else?
So I believe it's time for us to close the session, but welcome you to the next adventure. We will set the date pretty soon and let you know so that you can share with us. And we might be able to have younger voices coming to participate. That would be fantastic. And so again, thank you to the ones who are still online. Thank you to UNAM. Thank you a la Dirección de Literatura. They are the ones that initiated this adventure of the Encuentro. It has lasted for 4 days. In fact, in Mexico tomorrow, they will continue this conversation. And in Mexico, it's been full days since the morning till the evening, because it also has a film festival within. So we really hope that the next year we all might be able to meet in Mexico City. We'll try to do our best.
I know,
Eh,
right? Let's go.
You are all invited.
Everyone's invited.
And so also the ones who are there are invited to come to Los Angeles, UNAM Los Angeles, and thank you for each one of you. Thank you for your incredible audience for being with us. And well, have a good night and congratulations to all of us, okay?